For those on the line today who may not be so familiar with our association, what we do is we connect and support families in business, small business enterprises, and entrepreneurs to help drive the Atlantic economy. We offer safe and confidential forums for our members to share their business challenges with and learn from peer groups. We also provide programming platforms like this one with the support of our trusted advisors. With COVID-19, we are definitely in uncertain and challenging times for our businesses, our staff, and of course the families involved. And these webinars have really been able to connect us, really to enforce this key message that we are not alone during this time. We all have questions, we all are facing similar challenges, and we all are seeking guidance right now. So our advisors are online every week addressing concerns and giving advice. So please do continue to take advantage of these webinars. You may have already heard that we are waiving our membership fees until August 31st for all new family business members. And this is going to allow owners and family members to join virtual peer groups, connect with our pool of advisors, and be a part of programming that is really going to be tailored to the needs of those businesses who must continue operating during these times. So if you know anyone who can benefit from these offerings, please do share this information, and Michelle or myself would be happy to have a chat with you. We are really excited about today's session on leadership during a time in crisis, and the topic is actually really timely as we begin to prepare for the reopening of the province. Today we will have a very frank conversation with our panelists, Robert Patzelt and Peter Conlon, with C-Level Executive Solutions, facilitated by Andrew Morrissey, as they are going to use their real-life lessons to help us prepare and plan for success post this pandemic. Today we'll gain advice on how to strengthen our business, ourselves, our families, and our staff as we begin to rebuild in the upcoming months. A little bit about who we have on the line today. Our facilitator, Andrew Morrissey, is a managing and founding partner of C-Level Executive Solutions. He is an experienced, effective business leader with a specialty in business transformation and has been leading service-based organizations for nearly 2 decades. He provides clients in the manufacturing and mid-market enterprise business with a broad level of experience of how to achieve business objectives and success. Andrew previously held the Regional Vice President of Professional Services for PwC, ABM Integrated Solutions, just to name a few. We also have Robert Patzelt with us. Robert's one of our trusted advisors that we work really closely with at FBA. Robert is a CEO and business lawyer with 30 years of experience in organizational leadership, operations, mergers, acquisitions, and business development. He's an award-winning business leader who has leveraged his degree in business, economics, and Masters of Law to serve many organizations, including most recently CEO of New Millennium Iron Corp, and previously the Jodrey family with Scotia Investments Limited. And finally, we have Peter Conlon, Chief Executive Associate with C-Level. Peter as well has an extensive history of fixing and growing companies, both large corporations and small businesses, with 40 years of experience in general management and leadership in Canada, US, Europe, Latin America, Asia, and Australia. As president and CEO of Nautel Limited, he brought the company to a position of global leadership, including its selection as Exporter of the Year at the Nova Scotia Export Achievement Awards. So as you can all see, we have a huge lineup here for you today with a wealth of information to share. And C-Level is actually going to take it a step further with a special opportunity. FBA members are being offered a complimentary 1-hour Zoom forum to discuss your unique challenges, opportunities, and objectives for your business. So please do take advantage of this very generous offering. And we all need this extra advice as we step into this new era. So before we get started, please mute your microphones but ask your questions through the chat feature on your screen. And we do want this to be a very interactive webinar. So if at any time you want to ask a question directly, please do you can unmute your microphone as well. So with that being said, the forum is all yours, gentlemen.
Thank you, Amine. As Amine pointed out, for those of you that aren't here in Nova Scotia, it's a beautiful, fun, sunny day. We have this joke in Nova Scotia, what do you call the day after 2 days of rain? Monday. So that is exactly what has happened. So welcome all. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be, again, co-presenting with my good friend, Peter Conlon. Peter and I go back, well, probably same amount of time, 30-some years, working together in business, and especially on the Canadian manufacturers and exporters. Excuse me. So what we have right now is a perfect storm. We have this pandemic that's going on, the largest contraction since the Depression, biggest government intervention, and of course we have a price decline on oil happening all at the same time. And why this downturn is so different is because no one's immune. Wars usually happen in a certain area, something affects a certain industry. In this case, it has affected everyone. Think of an empty mall if you want to look at the economy in that respect. You'd go to the mall and the only store that's open is the liquor store and the grocery store. The mall is empty except for a few employees there for security and cleanup. And that's basically what the world economy is like right now, a severe disruption. I put the third bullet up just to give you a sense of scale. In April 15th last year, 2.3 million people went through the US checkpoints at airport security. This April 15th, 90,000. That is the significance of what has affected us right now. The 6 key areas of impact, and we are all experiencing them: supply chain, everything from yeast and flour, drop in consumption, which gas went down in Nova Scotia as far as 65 cents. Of course, you have nowhere to go. Financial impact, businesses have been severely impacted in that regard. We can't hang around with our friends or even go to work. And, there's, on the outset, it looks like there are going to be changes on supply chain, impact on globalization. And in fact, we're seeing some new relationships pop up with respect to private companies working with for-profit companies. This slide very, very quickly is about Nova Scotia. And the long and the short of it, SMEs are the driver of the economy. We count for 93% of the jobs, yet the private sector is only 60% of the economy. We need SMEs to get back up on their feet because that's where most of the jobs are, and that's really important. So we need a plan, right? So, sorry. Why isn't this going ahead? So everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. It's a great quote from Mike Tyson. The one thing that those of us who work with and for family businesses especially, we know what stresses are on you right now. It's not just your salary, it's your employer's salaries, it's your retirement, it's your family's wealth, it's the legacy that you have built up. And you really don't need this in this time of your life. But there's a big difference between responding and reacting. Responding is when you think and act. Reacting is when you act and then you regret. So fear, this is one of those situations where fear stands for forget everything and run. You really just want to pull the covers over your head and, just stay in bed. But that's not what leaders do. It's not what entrepreneurs do. It's not what we have done over the last decades in our lives. It also means that there's the potential for opportunity. When the economy contracts, that means some people are leaving certain aspects of the economy, and that may be an opportunity for you to get in there. And the greatest antidote to fear is actually doing something. So how do we move ahead? Peter, you want to take over?
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Robert. Action is important, but action has to be done with some sense of purpose. And one of the things that we need to do as business owners and business operators is to try and ensure that we know where to focus our effort. And it appears that there's a lesson coming out of this crisis where there's a space that we should be focusing. Back in the Great Recession, it was learned by all of us, or by most of us, that there was a liquidity and a leverage crisis. And so a lot of things were put in place to resolve that, which to our benefit was very important in this COVID crisis, because the banks were so much stronger than they were back in 2008 and 2009. It seems like there's a new fundamental that people are discovering, which needs to be rethought and rejigged, and that is within the supply chain. It's not the supply chain that's an issue, it's the way that we think about the supply chain. For decades, we have been mono-focused on faster, better, cheaper, just like Moore's Law. Everything's got to go quick, 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 and we became in love and globalization and with all sorts of things that allowed us to become hugely efficient. There's nothing wrong with efficiency. In fact, it's a beautiful thing. What was missing in all of this is balance. Our system designed to be efficient, but it was at a price, and that price is fragility, and we've seen that in spades during this COVID crisis. System needs a balance. It needs efficiency, but it also needs what people are beginning to call resilience. Resilience comes at a cost. So we're going to have to learn, you're going to have to learn, we're going to have to learn how to build resilience into our companies, into our mode of operating, which is going to cost a little more, and we have to do it in a way that it doesn't cause us the business relationships that we have, not forgetting about the lessons that we previously learned about efficiency and quality.
So just for everyone's benefit, these PowerPoint slides will be made available to anyone who wants them, just so you don't have to feverishly write down notes. So.
Right. Yes, and the reality is that this is evolving in real time. We designed and wrote this fairly recently. It might have been different 4 weeks ago. It's probably going to be different 4 weeks from now. But at this point in time, I think maybe our key message is wise companies are beginning to prepare for life post-COVID, because it's coming. The world is not going to end. And so if you're going to prepare for what's happening next, the time to do that is right now. And what we're proposing, and we've learned and we're understanding, is that the place to focus your efforts, to focus your action, as Robert referred to it, is in the area of take a look at whether you may have allowed yourself to become a zealot about efficiency and allowed your supply chain, your demand situation, your employee situation, your financial situation to become so narrow that it becomes fragile and inflexible. You need to ask yourself some key questions. What if I lost a key customer? I mean, there are companies probably on this call right now who might be sitting back and saying, oh my gosh, I'm so lucky I've got XYZ a customer and they represent 55% of my business, they pay my bills. This is a beautiful thing. What happens if that customer goes away? And I've seen that. So we need to be thinking about that. Robert, why don't you take over about scenario planning?
So just before I get into that, I just want to point out, and I don't want to be, Bobby Downer, didn't want to say Debbie Downer, Bobby Downer here. Just the global financial crisis impacted us all worldwide as well, but not to the same extent. And I just want to put it in context. U.S. spent $1 trillion on the global financial crisis. It has spent $3 trillion to date on COVID, right? And my personal opinion, these aren't even stimulus packages. These are stability packages. Stimulus packages are still to come. The other thing that we got to remember is that the global financial crisis really, was started in 2007, didn't come out of it till about 2011. Some would argue wasn't until 2013. So when you keep hearing these people talk about a V recovery, I'm not there. And it speaks to why I think we need to work on the issues like resilience and different things. Plus, pandemics have waves, right? There will be second and third bounces that are going to impact supply and demand and all those sorts of things. So
just Robert, if I could interrupt, which is, because you just did that to me, is the fact that globally the world has spent $10.6 trillion, which is 8 times the amount of money spent on the Marshall Plan.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. That's what you made last year. I realize.
I gave that most to Premier McNeil and Justin Trudeau. So on scenario planning, and I caution people here, that these are just tools, but the idea here is to start thinking out of the normal way you think. So, Peter talked about, what if you lost a key customer? What if there was a break in the supply chain? So one example is, what if your sales plunge 10, 15, 20, 25, 50%, whatever? That just forces you to think of what is the impact in your own organization. Again, no one knows how long this will last. But again, what if what if it is 6 months and you're in a seasonal business? What is the impact of that? We have a colleague on the line who's, for a long time worked with McCain's. I mean, farmers right now are deciding whether or not they should even put potatoes into the field, right? I mean, all of these things you have to think about. But the main idea here is, because normal is gone, you have to throw out different scenarios that make you rethink the impacts within your base in your organization. The other thing, and Peter pointed out to this is changing weekly. You need to put together a budget and a cash flow and adhere to it, and then update it weekly, because government funding came in. Government funding may get extended. Parts of it may get cut. Some of it may get amended. Again, chasing those accounts receivable, zealously, right? And you have to, in a way, do your financial data to get to the real P&L, to know what parts of your business are healthy or are not healthy, and track those to your forecast. So what you used to do on a monthly and possibly a quarterly basis, you may have to be doing on a weekly basis, because that's how quickly things are moving here.
And just as an add-on to Robert's view, or a secondary corollary or corollary, depending on where you live, one thing that you are going to struggle with, and we know it, we all do, is that you're going to have blind spots. And this is really probably the most interesting place for people to focus, because your blind spot is, well, that couldn't happen to me. No, we've been doing business with that company for 35 years, XYZ, whatever it is. What this pandemic has taught us is that those sacred cows that we thought were invincible went away. And so people are going to struggle. We were having a conversation about this presentation a week or so ago, and I remember somebody saying, well, I don't really need to worry about my supply chain. It's never failed me. Well, that's maybe the biggest mistake that person could make, because your supply chain could very well fail you. And so you cannot walk into this exercise saying, I don't need to worry about this. You have to honestly look at everything.
Absolutely. And there are opportunities coming out of this. We already hear the rumblings about changing the supply chain. We have had antibiotics, personal protective equipment, everything else dependent upon primarily one nation, that's Asia, China. And I think what you're going to see is governments and key institutions saying that we have to have that resilience, that diversity, and that may create opportunities for certain companies going forward. It's interesting, in the SARS epidemic, 3M put the N95 mask making capability on each continent across the world. I mean, they wanted to make sure after SARS that it wasn't just in China. They had them in North America, they had them in Europe, and that was the issue with Mr. Trump, right? When he wanted to stop the stuff at the border, 3M was saying, no, we have a North American supply chain. And by the way, Mr. President, all of our raw materials comes from British Columbia to go into a mask, then goes to the rest of America, Canada, and Mexico. He didn't get that. Anyway, the 3 areas of review, we've broken them down: financial, customers, and internal. Not going to spend a lot on the financial side of it. You're sophisticated business people. You understand liquidity, tightening your cash flow. The main thing here is to get rid of your non-essential expenses, obviously, and to move with speed. Value is the big one here. Like, do you understand what parts of your business are creating value or destroying value? What's the true profitability? That'll help you make some, appropriate decisions.
The other thing that's going to probably cause you all to gulp is that in these times where it's really tough, you're going to have to find a way not only to not spend, but to spend. You are going to have to invest in those things which allow you to come out of this at a run, because if you don't, you're going to get left behind.
Well, and a great example, the other day I was on the number 7 highway where Gateway Meats is. And I don't even know who the owner of Gateway Meats is, but what was interesting is they had built canopies right out to the highway so that people could stand out, not under the elements because it was raining and snowing and different things, social distancing, but they made it so that their customers could continue to go there. The parking lot was full, right? And what else was interesting is when you go on Facebook, they were allowing their customers now to pre-order a $100 shopping cart. So one was beef, one was pork, one was chicken. It had, French fries and other things in it. But you could pre-order and they would just wheel the shopping cart out to your car. And you didn't have to see or touch anyone. It was already paid for. And they even went so far as to that you could buy a shopping cart, a $100 shopping cart, and donate it to the food bank. And I mean, it's great pivoting, very, very fast, and very simple sort of things to do. So
now, just excuse me, but it's real. This is a beautiful thing that you just mentioned, because this is building resilience into your business model. If you think about it, what Gateway used to do is they had a very traditional model, which was they had a storefront, people walked in, they wandered around in a semicircle or a circle counterclockwise, and they bought this and they went to the cash and they walked out. And they had probably been doing that for 30 years. What they had to do was to stop and say, what should our business model, our business process look like when people can't come in the store anymore? And what they've done, like many, many organizations down here, I'm in the US, is they said, we're going to have to pivot, and we're going to have to allow people to do curbside pickup, et cetera, a different business model. What we need to be doing right now, if we want to become the winners in the post-COVID world, is be thinking about, okay, what could happen? How do I put in place those sorts of functions and processes that allow me to pivot quickly in the future to a different business model? Because there is going to be another COVID of some sort. Somebody's going to hack into the electric supply. We're going to get hit by an asteroid. I don't know whatever it is, but something is going to happen. A perfect example of pivoting, and excuse me for stealing your thunder here, Robert, but I just heard the other day that one of the big hotel chains has decided that it's going to go completely contactless, that you will check in online, you book your room online, check in online, you will not ever touch a person, a thing, stop, and you walk directly into your room. Use your cell phone to open the door. So it's a little investment in technology, but now whatever happens, at least in this one sense, that allows them to continue to operate as an entity in the face of something as traumatic as what's facing us in COVID.
See, that's based on the assumption that we are a long ways away from a vaccine, and people need to still go do things. So they're the touchless thing. So they've created a scenario there. I'm just going to quickly touch on the ostrich. I mean, you can be the ostrich and put your head in the sand and say things will get better. Peter's already mentioned there will be waves, there will be issues. You can be the bull in the china shop, which is just slash and burn. Anyone can be a butcher, but not everyone can be a surgeon. Or you can be the fox, which is, you're very surgical, very focused. And that includes spending money, because as I mentioned, when people contract, that creates an opportunity for you.
And I think it will just the second point in this, your key partners, both your suppliers and your clients, as we go forward, they're going to start asking this of you. Because if you think about it, your clients, you are a supplier to them. You're part of their supply chain. They have customers that they need to continue to supply. If they turn to you as a supplier and say, how can you guarantee supply of X, whatever that is, services, software, product, meat, whatever that is, if you need to tell me what you have done to ensure continuity of supply, because if you can't do that, I will need to go to somebody else who can do that, because I can't let my customers down.
And I mean, that leads me to a question. Think not only what your customer wants, think of how you can service the customer of your customer. Because if you can fit into their business model, you're going to keep that customer, you're going to make them happy. Just very quickly here on, right now, your competition isn't just your competition. Your competition is every customer, all of your customer suppliers, because basically under these tense times, they're looking at every dollar they're spending and determining whether or not they need that, right? So it's not just your competition, it's whether you're competing against Nova Scotia Power for their bill, you're competing against the landlord for their rent. I mean, because they're having to figure out how to spend their scarce dollars, which leads me to the second bullet point. Are you a painkiller? Do you solve a problem for them? Or are you a vitamin? Do you help them grow? Do you help them provide a service? Again, the customers. If you can fit into either one of those slots, you're more likely not to get cut, because you're an essential service to them. And then it goes without saying, those that provide outstanding service, as Peter mentioned, security of supply chain, that 4 weeks ago or 2 months ago, it would have been inappropriate for you to Zoom a customer or to call up and just have a chat. They're going, what's your problem? Why didn't you get in the car and come see me? Now they expect you to do this. So there's a benefit now in using the technology, because you don't have to waste as much time driving back and forth. And in fact, they want to hear from you, and they will accept doing it in the new way.
This is interesting that the little bullet there about high tech now requires a new high touch. You can also turn that around. In the new world of no touch may require high tech. So we should all be looking at what is it that we could do within our own organizations that allows us to stay in contact in a contactless world, which may or may not require an investment in some technology. Could be a different business model. It doesn't have to be a technology, but it may do that. And this is exactly where we need to be thinking about the fact that there will be investment required. So save dollars in location X, Y, and Z, but be unafraid and wise enough to invest it in A, B, and C.
And just, reaching out and having some empathy. We're all in this together, and times are tough. And I can tell you, a pure cold call or repurposing an old article that you wrote or whatever is just met with disdain and in some cases anger. I think, when you reach out and talk to people, understanding what the pain they're going through, that empathy is going to deliver a lot of values. And of course, being a country boy, I always used to say you dig your well before you're thirsty. I'm finding it fascinating how many of my friends and colleagues are out there. And I'll just give you an example. I'm the chair of the Friends of Hope Cottage. We went from sit-down service to delivering, meals by takeout, social distancing. We got tired of making sandwiches, and our clients got tired of eating them. You know, called up Jim Cormier at the Retail Council of Canada, and lo and behold, 5,000 containers show up for Hope Cottage. And I think there's a lot of these kinds of opportunities are starting to present themselves because people are asking, they're going to their customers and their suppliers and saying, how are we going to get through this together? And they're coming up with intriguing and interesting ways of solving each other's problems. Just on the communication side, this is one of those things in times of crisis, you need to over communicate. Right? And that's not bombarding people with emails, but giving them transparently clear, regular information. And don't just email and say, where the hell is this memo? I mean, someone had a baby, someone had a birthday, someone pulled off a really cool, innovative, you know, event. Celebrate those things, you know. And again, take care of your employees, because honestly, you know, really the assets that are driving in your trucks and going down, up and down the elevators in your company are the most valuable people, and they are absolutely critical right now.
They are absolutely scared right now. Those words at the very top are really critical. Our job as leaders is to allow our employees to gain and absorb energy from us to help them through their tough time.
Yeah, and remember, I mean, I'm as old as dirt, so I've been through enough cycles here and that, but you have employees that never have been in a downturn, right? And some of them are at that point in their life where their mortgage is as big. You remember when you got your first mortgage statement and it said, this month you paid off 91 cents of your principal? I mean, some of those people are there now, right? I mean, I'm sitting in a position where I'm, you know, I have no debt, but, you know, again, that's kind of a blind spot too, as to, you know, your own employees and family members as well. The other thing is that we're all learning how to communicate this way. And so you have to, another kind of a blind spot. Are you communicating as well as you could? I'm a really good walk around the plant floor person, and I've had to learn all of this new technology. You may find that you have to adapt your own techniques, because emails come across as terse. If you're in a bad mood, you read it and you really get angry, and then you read it the next day and go, he didn't mean to say that, right? That's the way I read it. Yeah, don't lose your key people. Couple points here. You may have opportunities here to, you may not be able to pay them more. You may have to make some changes, but can you cross-train? Can you supplement them? And, you know, as we all know, when we were really busy, there were projects we never got to. You may have employees that you're keeping on that are underutilized right now that you can put on those business development projects, put on that deferred maintenance project, those things that are critical to your going forward. They don't have to be idle. There are things that just, you know, everybody has a to-do list, they never get finished. When you look at your new way of going forward, you're going to say, you know, item 4 and item 11, really we need to get done now, because that's going to be an important part of our next pivot.
And this point that Robert makes about cross-training, this is a form of resilience or resiliency, whatever you want to call it. The fact is, if you have one employee who is highly skilled at doing something and that person gets sick or hit by a truck, that's the same sort of issue that we're facing here in small scale. If you cross-train your employees, very much like what Robert was saying about 3M moving its N95 mask making around the world, if you have multiple places where the same thing can get done, you have built resiliency into your organization, and your customers customers are going to value that. Key thing about them valuing that is that you do not have to be the price leader. If you can guarantee that you can supply even in crisis times, there's value in that. That turns into price.
Yep. So the main impact on this slide here is cut yourself some slack. I mean, you know, I've been CEO, Peter's been CEO, you know, even before then, you know, we would have been chief operating officers, things like that. We didn't create COVID. You didn't create COVID. But you don't need to carry all this water. You have to cut yourself some slack. Otherwise, you're going to come across as stressed and unhappy, and you're stressed and unhappy as it is. But if you're coming across that way, then you're feeding that into your system and into your organization. So at the end of the day, take a deep breath. Leaders got to lead. That's what we do. I already mentioned about learning how to do it remotely, because that pat on the back is harder to do, but you have to figure out a way to do it. These are two other techniques that we can use. If you were doing a bet the farm kind of decision, so a major pivot that requires investment in different things, you can do what's called a pre-mortem. So it's the exact opposite of a post-mortem, where, you know, you did something, you know, and I hope the democratic countries, because I'm certain China won't do it, but I hope we do a post-mortem on what happened with COVID in terms of communications, sharing resources, all those things. But a pre-mortem is basically saying, we're going to do X. Now let's make a list of everything that could go wrong, and then basically come up with the solutions for that. So what you're doing is de-risking the project by thinking in advance what could, you know, what can make it fail. But this requires you to work with your team, because again, we all have blind spots. And so you tell them, here's the plan, like, let's tear it apart.
But even more importantly than having a plan, because I saw that Andrew just sent a note around to everybody, risk management. Yes, this is a form of business continuity risk management, but building resilience into your organization is a huge step beyond that, because simple risk management or business continuity plans sit on a shelf waiting for something to happen, and then you can turn to them and say, okay, this is what we're going to do now. Building resiliency into your system, into your processes, is making the changes now so that when those things happen, you're already ready to face them. And this is what I think the difference between resiliency and risk management or business continuity. You don't think about what it is you're going to do. You think about it, and then you do something about it.
So this is another technique. I mean, so just, you can basically say to yourself, here's my company, here's my organization. 6 months ago, so let's go back to last June or something. If we knew this was going to happen, what would we have done, right? You know, and yes, it's 2020 hindsight, but the idea, it forces you again out of your normal thinking process and say, well, I would have expanded here, I would have cut here. This piece of flab, you know, I've been meaning to get to it, but I never got to it. This line of business, you know, we got into it, it's marginal, it just helps me spread overhead. Basically what it does is it allows you to sort of rethink the whole process, but it also has the opportunity, the side of it, because you're not thinking, how many people should I cut? You're saying, what could I have done? What should I be doing and going forward? So it's a technique, because again, I caution people, when you start asking questions like, how many people should I cut? You're working from a blind spot. It's a bad question, because you're assuming that you have to cut people, right? Go back to Gateway. They're probably not cutting people. They may be adding people, because they're now doing more shopping in the, you know, sales in a completely different way. Someone thought that through.
And this is an interesting moment in time to be listening to your, you know, those irritating employees that we all have, who want they say, oh, there's something wrong here, and we go, oh my gracious, not again. Well, maybe the time now is to take those independent thinking employees and actually listen to them, because there may be some very, very valuable insight that they're bringing that will help us get beyond the blind spots that we're talking about.
So this quote is really just about being a leader, as is the next one. 80% of success is just showing up. And that's the thing. You need to be visible, and that may have to be online, but you need to be present. You need to be doing the equivalent of walking around the office and walking around the shop floor. Because if you're missing an action, there is a very real sense, and in these negative times, people default to a negative perception, that their first thought isn't, she's busy in her office trying to save the company. Their first thought is, you know what, he's given up, right? He's, you know, I'm a customer and I haven't heard from him or her. I'm a supplier and they haven't called me up. So they're gone or they're about to be going. You have to be front and center. I mean, that is why Justin Trudeau is doing the briefings and Doug Ford every day. I mean, leaders have to be seen, right? And even if you don't want to do it, you know, get out of bed, make your bed, put on your shirt. I mean, and, you know, off you go. Dress like you were going to work, even though, you know, you're in your house, right? And I know all of you are not wearing your pajama bottoms right now because that's not what we do. So, you know, you just have to tough it up, because if you lead, they will follow, right? But also communicate what you're doing to show that you're making changes, that you're showing that the resilience, even if they're little things, like saying, guess what? We bought the better package of Zoom so we could talk more. Got Joe here on communications, creating a personal Facebook for just our company, or a Facebook page just for our suppliers. Those little things rather than, you know, the big things. And I mean, and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. You have to just do it, right? I mean, I always used to tell my legal counsel, right? Because the lawyers are just so risk averse. I said, an 80% answer that I have this afternoon is worth more than a 100% answer 2 weeks from now. And that's the reality. Speed is critical.
Yeah, and the other thing is that risk is a 4-letter word. We must face and manage risk. If you try to live in a risk-free world, then theoretically you will get zero return. So we cannot eliminate risk. We've got to eliminate risk to the point where it matches our risk tolerance profile. I think the other thing about Robert's message about being out and being seen and is maybe even more important in family businesses, because they are a family. Your employees are part of your family. And even something, you know, if you go back, that we don't have to go back to that slide, but at the bottom of the slide, there was this note, Lexus. That's a pretty big company that says, take care of your people first, the rest will follow. Richard Branson, number one, the most important asset you have, it's not your customers, it's your employees. So you've got to focus in on helping your employees overcome their fear. And the best way to do that is by being seen.
Yeah. And again, it's not all about cut and burn and slash. I mean, it's also about visualizing what your company, your organization, your family could look like in the future. I mean, if you're always focused on the negative, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So you have to look at some of the positive potential impact about that. And remember, you have to trust in yourself. All of us have made it through school, have raised babies, paid off our mortgages for the most part, built businesses, gotten through tough times. For the people who, you know, have started businesses and nurtured them along, and, you know, they've gone through crisis. But you've done this before. This one's bad. I'm not sugarcoating it. But the thing is, you have way more muscle tone than you think, right? And you need to rely on that. And that's also why it's important when you're communicating with your employees. Every little positive thing you should do, you should be communicating and celebrating, because then it shows you're moving forward.
I saw an interesting, you know, picture online which said, my record of facing really difficult times to date is actually 100%, because I'm here. And so maybe I should feel pretty good about that.
Well, and I have to look at my own career path. Every one of the best moves that ever happened to me came out of a negative event. I mean, I was on the dean's list of the University of Alberta and didn't get accepted to the University of Alberta Law School, but I got accepted to Dalhousie, right? Got, you know, articled in the depths of the recession in 87, 88. They kept no clerks. I was at one of the big law firms to be hired by the Jodrey family and then have a 25-year career with them. I mean, they all came out of bad times, right? Now, I have to admit, I was really angry, pissed off at the time, but I mean, you know, it happened. So Again, confidence is a muscle memory. Celebrate those small successes. On decision making, if you don't make a decision, you're leaving the message to yourself and others that it's still open. You should make a call and go with it. You can always turn around, pivot on it, or rescind it. But when you make a decision, you are showing you're going forward. When you're making no decision, I mean, unless it's a big bet the farm one, and we've talked about that, I mean, you're waffling.
And look, face the fact, not making a decision is making a decision. It's making the decision no. So there's no such thing as not really making a decision. If you're just afraid to take it, all you're doing is allowing yourself to say, oh, I didn't actually say we shouldn't do that.
So fear is a 4-letter word, and in this case, face everything and rise. And I am going to end my part of the talk talking about R.A. Jodrey with person. R.A. had passed on before I joined the Jodrey family. John, his son, was the patriarch at the time, and he was in his mid-70s. But R.A. Jodrey made 2 fortunes in his life. He was crating up barrels of apples and sending them to Europe, and then he brought electricity essentially to the valley, and he kept buying investments and made a huge fortune in the stock market to be completely wiped out in the crash of 1929. And all he had left was a broken down pulp mill called Minus Basin Pulp and Power. And banks wouldn't lend him any money. So he made handwritten bonds. Now you think about it, the capital markets aren't what the capital markets are today. He hand wrote bonds and sold them to friends and families and neighbors and people that he knew in the valley, and raised enough money to modernize the plant, and then built the St. Croix Dam, which is in existence to this day. So, and we have pictures, at the old site where, they're using oxen to haul cement and big rocks and everything else. And from then he rebuilt a second time. We've since closed that mill. It had an 85-year run, but CKF is still there now, which is interesting as well, because he bought Canadian Keys Fiber, which is the company that makes Chinette paper plates, amongst other things, all the cup carriers for Tim Hortons across Canada. And I mean, he actually bought into that company in the mid-30s. And the purpose of this story, A, it's real, B, it's Nova Scotian, and C, it was a really, really bad time. And R.A. Jodrey did not turtle. He said, okay, what do I do? Well, I'm a business person, and he's basically started all over again, to the point where I got to work for a great family for 25 years, overseeing, up to 2,000 employees. And that, I wanted to end A, on a positive note, and B, on the fact that that's inspiring, because that's real, right? You want to tell your not-tell story there, Peter?
Nope.
No.
I decided that I wouldn't tell the not-tell story. And what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about a different story, which is LED roadway lighting. And the reason I wanted to change is because this idea of building resilience into an organization can be really, really daunting and difficult to understand and do. And the second thing is that I want to talk about looking forward rather than addressing negative times, which I would have done in the first story. When I had the opportunity to run LED roadway lighting, it is a great family business and continues to be a great family business. There was an obvious challenge that we noticed as a management team, which was LED had all of its manufacturing facilities in one building in Amherst, Nova Scotia. And we sat and thought a little bit about this and said, well, that's a pretty interesting potential single point of failure. But even more important, what was happening in the macroeconomic world was LED roadway lighting, LED lighting was becoming the only way that organizations, people, municipalities were going to go. So we knew that demand was going to start to skyrocket. And it was obvious to us that we would have a problem with only one manufacturing facility, which was limited by people, machines, etc. So we decided in advance to build resiliency into our supply chain. And we went out and worked with an existing partner in the Far East and another existing partner in the Caribbean to build 3 locations where the product could be built. It turned out to be not a lot of money, but it turned out to be a fantastic capacity builder, so that when our, say, average monthly shipments quintuple, which they did because it's a great business, we did not stand there looking dumbfounded saying, I have no idea how to actually deliver to this thing. We had already put in place, i.e. not just planned, but executed, a resilient supply chain situation in place, which allowed the company to grow incredibly well over a couple of years, double in size over a couple of years. So this idea of building resiliency doesn't only have to happen because negative things are happening. Resiliency is a capacity, is what they call an axis of competition. You can be the cheapest, you can have the most functionality, you can be the first to market, you can have the highest quality, and you can also be the organization that people can rely on, so that irrespective of what happens, they know, your customers and your customers' customers know that you are going to be there for them in the future. And we need to make decisions today to prep ourselves and put in place that which allows us to do it. If you do that, you can come out, you can literally come out of this COVID world as a leader.
So that's all I have for now. Andrew, any questions coming forward?
I'd like to open it up to the floor. Again, if you want to take yourself off mute and pose any questions. Before we do that, amazing CEO dialogue, Peter and Robert. You brought a lot of great points of view for the leaders that are on this call, and we'll now open it up to any questions.
So while we're waiting for a question, Amine pointed to it that if you send us an email with a particular challenge that you're facing, we will put together an advisory board. And of course, depending on the question, we would bring in different experts. C-level has financial people, IT people, engineering expertise, all kinds of different expertise. So depending on
marketing, operations.
Yeah. So
strategy.
We would put together a team and then come back to you with a complimentary 1 to 2 hour video conference on your specific question.
Got a question from Sandra McKenzie. Go ahead, please.
Robert and Peter, the question I would have is that something I've been paying a lot of attention to over my career is the pressure that's put on employers to make good decisions with respect to training. Have seen a lot of employers end up buying the training they're being sold as opposed to being able to assess the training for what it is they need, and they struggle to identify what it is they need. So I'm just wondering if there's any advice, because the training and retraining that's going to come right now, particularly when cross-training or pivoting is going to be really important. So I'm just interested in your thoughts, both of your thoughts on that.
Excuse me for leaping into this, because you have absolutely nailed something that is really, really beautiful and I believe in firmly. I remember reading somewhere something that someone had said, would you rather that you trained your employees and had them leave, or not train them and have them hang around?
Yeah.
And this is unfortunately what a lot of organizations do, is they say, yeah, we should be training our employees, and it kind of fits somewhere in the budget around marketing. And then when times get a little tough, it gets sliced because, well, it's not going to affect in the immediate term. This is a long-term thing. I think your point is well taken. You need to think intelligently about what is it that our employees need to have, what is it that our employees are missing, where can we get wise support for our employees in that way? And then you need to invest in it, because that's building resilience. Having good employees who know what they're doing, who can step in when others are struggling, will work as a team. And if you have a strong team, you can move mountains.
Yeah, I think that coming out of first of all, I'm getting a little bit, it's problematic for me when everyone talks about post-COVID, because I think we're going to be in a inter-COVID world for quite a while, right? I believe that there's an opportunity coming because of COVID that's similar to when the GIs came back from World War II, that we had the GI Bills and the equivalent of it, where we sent them off to school because there was nowhere else to put them. And I think the same thing is going to happen here. We're going to have a whole bunch of people on the street. You think about restaurant business. There's 800,000 people in the restaurant business in Canada. To what extent that they go back into that business because their businesses have changed so much. What do you do with those people? They need to be retrained, right? But they have certain skill sets that we can lever on. So governments are going to have to figure out to be very flexible in the kinds of programming that and incentives in that they offer. Your question about, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And so here you are as an organization changing, and you will need to, get certain kinds of people. And it'll be interesting because you're actually going to see companies that will be laying people off because they're no longer necessary required with that specific skill set, and having other ones coming in, because it's just the way the business, had transitioned. And so it's important that we treat the ones going out the door well and get them in the best possible spot, and at the same time hire all the right people. And that's going to be an interesting challenge, because if you're someone of my age and we've always done it this way, I've got a blind spot. So I have to turn to people and say, okay, here's what I want to do, but you have to tell me what I'm really looking for, right? I mean, it's kind of like my truck. I have a beautiful truck. I know how to drive it well. I don't know how to fix it anymore. I mean, it's got fuel injection, all this different kind of thing. So I have to turn to someone with that expertise. And it's going to be an interesting challenge for HR professionals, because I don't think a lot of them are up to the game right now, because, they've come up through the ranks in a different model, right? As a board director, I find it very challenging because we get engagement surveys and things like that. And I'm going, that's like taking the blood pressure and the pulse of someone who's healthy. It's not telling me that it's working, right? What is my health really? And that's the same thing for a company. How you get there? It's a fascinating question, Sandra. I mean, the better human resource companies will come up with some really good tools to help us.
I think just shamelessly, I'm going to say this is a point in time where organizations probably need to turn to advisors to help them get beyond blind spots, because it's very difficult to get beyond your own blind spot by definition. And so, this come and talk to us for an hour, I think, is a good way for many of you, hopefully many of you, to spend some time with some people who don't think the same way you do, bring a different perspective, are not afraid of your sacred cows.
Yeah. And this is a time to engage with your employees too, because with the greatest respect to, consultants, those of us who've been there, done that, and that, no one knows your company better than they do, right? And but you have to tell them what you're thinking and where you want to go. And they'll say, here, I know how to do that, sort of thing. I've got an idea, because I've always been impressed by, the young people that I've brought onto teams, and knowing that they lack the experience, but they have this unbridled enthusiasm and a way of looking at the world. And then they'll put, they're like the 5-year-old when you had a 5-year-old in your house going, why? And then they forced me to answer all their questions. And then all of a sudden, it popped out where we go, yeah, why did we do it that way? Right? Like, it's wrong, right?
Well, and if you didn't do it, we'd still all be doing business by telex.
Yeah. Well, like, Henry Ford said, what, he got them a car. What the public wanted was a faster horse.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's the top of the hour. I want to, we'll stay online for any additional questions that come up, but I do want to respect everybody's time here to close this and to give thanks to the Family Business Association, Michelle, Sarah, and Amini for allowing us to come and present some insights from our CEO advisory team here. For those that are signing off, have yourself a great day. That those that want to stay on for some additional dialogue and questions, I'm going to end the recording now, but we'll stay on for future questions.
I just wanted to say as well, thank you so much, Robert, Peter, and Andrew. This conversation was definitely motivational for a Monday morning. And you're right, employers are really looking to their leaders right now for direction and guidance. So leaders do have to lead. And you've given us some tips today on how to do this remotely, yet still be seen, which I understand is very important during this time. And wise companies, they are getting ready to prepare for what's next post-COVID. So we really do need to focus our actions and efforts to being efficient, yet flexible. And what I understand is we can all come out of this if we really build resilience into our organizations. What was really great about today is that up until today, our webinars were really customer focused. And I really liked how today we spoke about employees as they are the core of the organization. And right now, more than ever, it is really time to put them at the forefront of leaders' minds. So thank you for the information. And for everybody still online, please do take advantage of the 1 hour Zoom forum with C-Level. I know I'll be taking advantage of it, so I'll definitely be in touch. With Family Business Atlantic, we will continue